In order to make these crochet capris, you're going to need a few different materials. The first is the yarn. I'm using the Loops and Threads Luxe Merino yarn from Michaels. I ended up using two skeins total, so one of each color. And I'm going to alternate between these two colors in order to create a stripe pattern. However, you can do a solid color if you prefer. This color here is the Celestial Blue, and this is Chalk Blue, although it looks more green in person. You'll need a crochet hook that works with the size and weight of your yarn. I'm going to use a 4mm hook. You'll need a pair of scissors, a darning needle, and a few stitch markers. So most of the capris will be made up using the half double crochet stitch, only working into the back loop. That's going to be the body of the capris. For the lower waistband ribbing, I'm going to be doing the single crochet stitch, working only into the back loop. And this part is optional, but if you want to make a drawstring or a waist tie that goes along the lower waistband ribbing, I'm going to do the basic I-cord stitch in order to create that. So if you can do all three of those stitches, you'll be able to make these. So let's get started. I'm going to start by making a chain that will be equal to the height of the ribbing that goes around the lower waist. So I'm going to do 11 chains. This is how 11 chains look. I do want my ribbing to be a little taller or chunkier, so that's why I went with 11. But if you want yours to be shorter, you could just pick a lower number. I'm also going to chain one more for height because I'm going to be doing the single crochet stitch. Skipping that first chain from the hook, I'm going to work a single crochet into the second, and then I'm going to continue across the row. I'm at the end of the row. This is how tall the ribbing is again. I'm going to chain one, flip my work, and then work across doing single crochet stitches, but only into the back loop. I'm at the end of the row again. I'm going to chain one, flip my work, and then single crochet across, only working into the back loop. I'm going to continue to do these single crochet rows exactly the same until the ribbing is long enough to wrap around my lower waist. I'm going to come back when I'm done. I finished doing the waistband ribbing. I ended up doing 128 rows total. So now I'm going to use the slip stitch to join one end to the other. I'm going to match up the ends of the ribbing and making sure it's not twisted. And then I'm going to slip stitch across to join them. I'm at the end of the row. I already cut my yarn and I'm going to be switching colors. I'm going to yarn over and pull all the way through. So I'm going to switch to my second color and I'm going to go back and forth every few rows between this blue color and I have this green color for the other stripes. It's up to you to decide what type of pattern you want to do, but you don't have to color change when I color change. So now I'm going to reinsert my crochet hook at the top here where I cut my yarn. I'm going to yarn over with my second color, pull through. Taking the short piece, I'm going to yarn over and pull all the way through, reinsert my hook, yarn over, chain two. So I'm going to be doing half double crochet stitches for the body of these capris. In order to keep the ribbing the same width that it is now and to keep it consistent, between these two raised parts, so like right here, right here, right here, and right here, right here, and right here, I'm going to do two half double crochet stitches in between each. If you do three, it's going to make the ribbing really wide. If you do one, it'll tighten it up and it might not fit as well as it did. So I'm going to do two. I'm going to start by doing one here and then another one at the top here. And that would be two between the ribbing, and you can pretend the center back is another ribbing. So I'm going to do one here And the second one. Two between this ribbing and this ribbing. I'm gonna come back when I get to the end of this row. I'm at the end of my row. I'm gonna slip stitch into the very first stitch of the row in order to close the round. I'm gonna chain two, and then I'm gonna put my hook down for a second. So on this next row, I'm gonna be increasing at the side seams, so around here and here. In order to figure out where my side seams are, I'm gonna use my stitch markers and count. So I'm gonna fold the ribbing in half. I have the center back, which is where I start and stop the rows on one side, and then this other side would make the center front. If I fold it in half again, the stitch that's right here, that could be my side seam. And then you could mark on the other side with your second stitch marker, this stitch right here, but I wanna count the number of stitches from the center back to make sure that I'm putting the stitch marker on the same exact stitch on the other side. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna match it up and then count. So this one right here, I'm gonna put my stitch marker on, and there are the same number of stitches from here to here and here to here. So I'm gonna reinsert my crochet hook. I already flipped my work, so I'm gonna half double crochet around this next row. I'm only gonna be working into the back loop, and I'm gonna stop when I get to my first stitch marker. Actually, I've reached my first stitch marker. I'm gonna increase by doing 2 half double crochet stitches into the same stitch. So it's 2 and 1. And then I'm gonna continue to work across this row until I reach the second stitch marker. I reach my second stitch marker. I'm gonna do an increase again by doing 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. And then I'm gonna continue along until I reach the end of the row. I'm at the end of my row. I have one last half double crochet to do, and then I'm gonna slip stitch into the very first stitch in order to close my round, chain two, and then flip my work. This next row, I'm not gonna increase. I'm just gonna half double crochet into the back loop, into every single stitch. And I'm gonna come back when I'm at the end of this row. I'm at the end of this row. I'm gonna finish it off by slip stitching into the very first stitch, chain two, and then I'm gonna put my hook to the side for a second. So I should have done this earlier, but when you do a new row, you need to move your stitch marker up so you can know exactly where to increase on that next row. So this is my first stitch marker. It has 2 stitches here to make an increase. You can pick either the left or the right stitch to do your increase on. So I'm gonna pick the right one because it's closer to the center back. And then the stitch right above it, that's where I'm gonna move my stitch marker to. And what you do to one side, you have to do to the other one as well. So this is the increase. There's 1, 2 stitches here. I'm gonna pick the one closest to the center back. And then the stitch right above it is this one. I'm gonna move my stitch marker up to here. Actually, it's right here. Okay. I'm going to reinsert my crochet hook, flip your work for the next row, and then I'm going to half double crochet across, working into the back loop. I'm going to increase when I get to that first stitch marker. I'm at my first stitch marker. I'm going to increase by doing 2 stitches into the same one. And then I'm going to continue to move along the row, increasing at the second stitch marker. I'm at my second stitch marker. I'm going to increase again. I'm at the end of the row again. I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch to close the round. Chain 2, and then flip my work. This next row will be a stable row, and you might have noticed a pattern starting to form. So the first row, no increase. Second row, increase at the side seams. Third row, no increase or stable row. This previous row was an increase at the side seams again. So the next one will be stable. The next one will be increase again, stable, increase. It's up to you to decide how many increase rows you want to do total. So I think I'm going to do 4, and I'm going to come back when I get to the end of my 4th increase. I'm at the end of my 4th increase row. I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch to close up the round, chain 2. So this top row here, it's definitely wide enough that I can fit it over top of my hips, which is the widest part of my lower body. I won't have any issues with getting the capris on and off. I don't really feel like I need to increase anymore, so this 4th one is my last one. For this next section, I'm only going to do stable rows, meaning that I'm not going to increase at the side seams, and I'm going to continue to work up these stable half double crochet rows until the bottom or this top part here reaches right above where my crotch area ends. If you feel like you need to do more increases, that's fine. You just need to try it on every few rows. Consider your measurements. You don't want to increase it too much where it just gets super loose. These capris are supposed to fit pretty snugly, pretty comfortably. If you feel like that 4th increase row was too much, you can take it out and only do 3. You just need to consider your measurements. So I'm going to come back when I'm at the end of the next section, and I can tell you how many rows I did exactly. So after that 4th increase, I did 12 rows where I didn't increase at the side seams, just straight across. Now I can move on to the next step because when I try the capris on, the bottom row here, this one here, it hits right above where my crotch ends. So it's long enough to move on. What I'm going to do is make a chain that is about 6 inches long, and it'll go from the center back to the center front, which will create 2 leg holes. So right now I have one big opening. The chain is going to go from here to here, and then it's going to separate it for the leg holes. So I already did this part off camera, but what you're going to do is find your center front stitch, which you'll use a stitch marker to mark it. Mine's is here. You can count the number of stitches on each side and then match them up to get whatever the stitch is for you. So I'm going to reinsert my crochet hook. And I'm going to chain until it's about 6 inches. It's a little long, so I'm going to take 2 out. And that's about 6 inches. So I already cut my yarn. I'm going to slip stitch into that space. And then pull the yarn all the way through. And that way it joins the chain from the center front to the center back. So now I have 2 leg openings. I'm gonna reattach my yarn right here, and then I'm gonna half double crochet across, only working into the back loop. So I'm gonna make this around, and then when I'm finished with this side, I'm gonna reattach the yarn to this side, and then I'm gonna make a second round. Here is my yarn. I'm still gonna be working with my second color yarn. Okay, so you can just pick any stitch to be the center, just somewhere in the middle. I'm gonna insert my crochet hook just into the back loop, yarn over, and pull through. I'm gonna take the short piece and yarn over, pull all the way through, reinsert my hook, yarn over, chain 1, yarn over, chain 2. I'm gonna be crocheting this way, so I need to flip my work. I don't count those first 2 chains as their own stitch, so I'm gonna do a double crochet into that same stitch, a half double crochet into that same stitch, and then I'll continue along. I reached the end of my first row, or the first row of the pant leg. I'm gonna slip stitch into the very first half double crochet. I'm gonna chain 2 and flip my work. And for this next row, I'm gonna start it with a decrease. So I'm gonna decrease into the first 2 stitches, and then I'm gonna continue across until I get to the very last stitch of the row. I'm at the end of my second row. I'm gonna finish it off with a slip stitch into that first decrease, chain 2, and then I'm gonna flip my work. I'm gonna start with a decrease again. So in those first 2 stitches, do a half double crochet decrease. And then I'm gonna continue to half double crochet, working into the back loop until I get to the last stitch of this row. I'm at the end of my third row. I'm gonna slip stitch into that first decrease, chain 2, and then flip my work. This next row, I'm not gonna start with a decrease. I'm just gonna half double crochet across, 1 into every stitch. And there is a pattern that is starting to form. So on the first row, we didn't decrease, it was just a stable row. Second row decrease at the first 2 stitches, third row decrease at the first 2 stitches, fourth no decrease for a row. So the next row will be decreased at the first 2 stitches, next row will be decreased at the first 2 stitches, and then no decrease for a row. You're going to continue to do that decrease pattern until the capris reach below your knee or the length that you want them to be. I just finished my first pant leg off camera, so this is how the capris look so far. And unfortunate for me, I kind of realized that I do not like the stripe pattern that I created. I'm going to take the majority of the capris apart and redo it with a different stripe pattern. Hopefully it'll look a little better this time. So when I come back, it's gonna be the same design. Like I'm gonna increase and decrease at the same spots, but it's just gonna look a bit different. I finished my first pant leg off camera. I ended up doing 38 rows total. So now the capris are the length that I want them to be. And you can see that I changed my stitch pattern. I did the exact same decrease pattern along the center of the leg. So the first row was stable, then decrease, decrease, and then stable. And this time I decided to switch colors every 2 rows. I think this thinner stripe just looks a lot better than the thicker ones that I had earlier. But at the second hole here, I'm gonna reattach my yarn where I did it the first time. And then I'm gonna half double crochet around, only working into the back loop. So I'm gonna insert my crochet hook here. This is where I attached the yarn the first time around. I'm gonna yarn over and then pull through. I'm gonna take the short piece, yarn over and pull all the way through. And then I'll reinsert my crochet hook into that loop, chain 2. I don't count the first 2 chains as one half double crochet, so I'm gonna do one into that same space. And then I'm going to continue around. I'm gonna work into one of the loops, just doing one. It should be across from like the previous row. So now I've reached the body of the capris and I can actually work into the back loop. I'm going to continue to do half double crochets until I get to the end of this row. I'm at the end of this first row. I'm going to slip stitch into that very first half double crochet. And then I'm going to chain 2, flip my work, and I'll be starting this next row with a decrease. So I'm going to follow the same decrease pattern that I did on the first leg. I'm going to come back when the pants leg or the capri leg is long enough to match the other side. I finished my second pant leg off camera. I followed the exact same decrease pattern as I did on the first one, where I was decreasing at the inner side seams. So both are identical. You can see this is how they look. And I can't fit both of them in the camera frame at the same time, but you can tell that I have a million and one loose ends here. Since I switched the stitch pattern or the stripe pattern, I was switching off every 2 rows. I'm gonna have to tuck all of those loose ends because of it, but that is a later problem. So I'm gonna put the capris to the side for a second. And this next step is optional. I'm gonna create a waistband tie that will lace through the lower ribbing. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I think it is really cute to have it. So I'm gonna use both of my yarns since I use 2 different colors. I wanna create like a marl looking tie, but if you're using a solid color, you'll just use one piece. I'm gonna take my yarn, put them side by side, and then first thing I'm gonna do is create a slip knot. And then you'll insert your crochet hook into that loop. I'm going to start by chaining 4. And then, so I have 4 chains here. I'm going to skip that first chain that we just did and insert my crochet hook into the second chain from the hook. I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop. So now I have 2 loops on my hook. You're going to ignore that it's double. It's really 4 loops on my hook, but just pretend like it's really just 2. Then I'm going to insert into that third chain, yarn over, and then pull up another loop. Now I have 3 loops on my hook. Insert into that last chain, yarn over, pull up a loop. I have 4 loops on my hook now. I'm going to pull this bottom part down a little bit. This loosens up my loops. And then I'm going to take the first 3 loops off of my crochet hook. yarn over, and then pull up a loop. So this part, you want to make sure you're being careful because you don't want these loops to unravel. I'm going to insert my crochet hook into that first loop here, yarn over, pull up a loop. Into the next loop, I'm going to insert my crochet hook again, yarn over, pull up a loop. And then the very last one, I'm going to insert my crochet hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. So now I have 4 loops on my hook again. I'm going to pull this bottom part down, and you can kind of see how, since I use 2 yarns, it's marled a little bit, but yours might look different if you're only using one color. So I'm going to remove the last 3 loops off the hook again, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert my crochet hook into that first loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, into the second, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then into the last one, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now I just finished another row. I'm going to pull this down some more just to loosen up my loops. Remove the first 3, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert into the next loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, just finished another row. So I'm going to continue to make this waist tie until it is long enough to lace through the front of my lower waistband ribbing and then also hang down on the sides. So I'm going to make 2 waist ties total. I want the first one to lace through the front, hang down on the side seams, and then the back one will lace through the back and hang down on the side seams. They will both tie at the side seam, so I will have 2 ties or 2 bows total. I'm going to come back when this one is the length that I need it to be. I finished making my first drawstring. It's about 36 inches total, so this is how long it is. And now I'm going to cast off. So in order to do that, I still have 4 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. Then I'll yarn over and pull through 2 more loops. And then I'll yarn over and then pull through the last 2. Now you have 1 loop on your hook. I'm going to yarn over and then pull through that one. And then I can cut through my yarn. Okay, so it starts to curl a little bit at the top. You want to just kind of finish that curl with your fingers. And then this is my first drawstring. I'm going to do my second one off camera because I did say the first one will lace through the front, the second one will lace through the back. I'm going to do the second one off camera, as I said before. Then I'm going to tuck on my loose ends and lace both ties through the front and back waistband. So at this point, I'm pretty much done. I'm going to switch to some images of the capris. That's the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching to the very end. I really appreciate it. I decided not to use the waist tie for the blue and green striped capris. I just wasn't a fan of how it looked, but I do have a waist tie on the pink capri, so you can see how it looks both ways. I'm also going to have a written pattern that's available on Etsy for purchase. If you prefer to read as opposed to watching a tutorial, you'll have the option to do so. But thanks again for watching to the very end. Please like, subscribe, share, all that. Thanks.